that's us right now. My wish is that we take notes, learn this anomaly, work through it together, and come out the other side better scientists, because we can.
Welcome to the Creative Mindset Podcast. My name is Isolde Trachtenberg, and I'm super happy you're here. On the show, I focus on creative thinking, problem solving, and living. Most often, I'll discuss how to ignite inspiration, meet challenges, and achieve goals through creative thinking. Sometimes I'll have guests who give their perspective. Usually, it's people who are already living their best and most creative lives. Okay, let's get to it. Hello, and welcome to the Creative Mindset Podcast. My name is Isolde Trachtenberg, and I am super thrilled that you are here. I'm also incredibly thrilled and honored to have the wonderful Beth Mund, speaker, writer, space geek, and many other things, as my guest today. Beth was on the show a long time ago, and we've planned on being together again, and this is our very first opportunity to do it. I'm so excited to have you here, Beth. Welcome.
It is so good to see you and hear you. Hi, Isolde.
Hi. I believe in honesty and transparency, and I'm just going to have to say it. We had recorded about 20 minutes of this wonderful conversation, and I should say I had thought that we had recorded it because the little record button, I did not press it well enough. And so we have all of this stuff that we just had this lovely conversation that you might have heard, but we're going to try and get back on track. And
take two.
That's right. The Creative Mindset Podcast with Beth Mund, take two. I wish I had one of those little clapper things, a little slate. So let's, I know that we have so much to talk about. I would love to start actually talking about what has changed for you right now. We are living in uncharted territory. We're walking a path no one's ever walked before. What's going on with you with that? How are you navigating this new normal?
Oh my goodness, everything in every way, just like all of us, I think. Everything from my sleep habits. I'm a night owl by nature, and I don't care what you say. If you know what you are, you can't morph into something else. You can try. I have tried in the past. When I worked at NASA, they had a boot camp program in the morning that was for exercise. Did it work? Yes. Did it get me thin and fit? Yes. Did I have a blast to meet my husband at this said event? Yes. Did I hate every single moment? Yes, because it was like, gosh, it was like at 5:30 a.m.
Ooh.
And I know. And so my creativity turns on at 4 and it doesn't stop till almost 2 a.m. And I've tried everything. I've tried to get up earlier. I've tried to change habits. Even through my school years and even at work, I've tried it. But when I am truly creative, my time is in the evening, and I feel like the earth, the world, my house, it all quiets down so that I can check off my responsibilities and allow myself to be creative, if that makes sense. So, yeah, so what's changed for me is my bedtime, because I stay up so much later. So literally and figuratively, I'm up later, I wake up later, and I've had to pivot everything. The way I'm parenting is a lot more gentle. The way I'm in my home is a lot more fierce, because when you're home and you're looking at your environment, I don't know about you, but I can't work until the environment I'm working in is clean. And when I say clean, I mean usually OCD spotless.
Wow.
And I just feel like when it's light and in place and organized, that I can sit and be focused and work. If there's something that is like a to-do pile, or I'm looking over my shoulder and there's something, same in my bedroom. If I wake up in the morning and there's a laundry basket waiting for me to fold, or dishes in the sink, oh, forget it. I can't even. So that's been a challenge. And then do you have any of these odd habits?
Oh yeah, okay. All the time. I wish that some of the cleanliness that you are talking about had rubbed off on me. I would like to be a little bit more neat than I am. And I find myself operating in chaos a lot because my husband is a downright slob. So I'm constantly having to fight the battle between picking up after him and throwing my hands up and going, no, 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 I'm going to go play guitar instead. So, so,
You're so
but
creative. So that creativity comes from inspiration that surrounds you. And I've seen on your camera a few times your work environment. It's gorgeous. You have colors and you have items, and I think they're from all over the world. So when you surround yourself in that, doesn't that bring you creativity? And if that's the case, I'm in big trouble because I need to put some more color in my work environment.
oh, I think what you said earlier though makes a lot of sense. It's what you need is what you have to do for yourself. You know, you
Mhm.
are a night owl and you know yourself well enough to know when you are most inspired, when you're most motivated and most creative. And not trying to force yourself out of that is what allows you to thrive, you know?
Yes,
And
the problem is nobody wants to do a podcast with me at 10:30 p.m.
well, now see if you were talking to my husband and you were interested in talking to a clown about space, for example, which, you know,
Oh.
he would be perfect because today I had to wake him up at 2 p.m. because he was
What?
up. Yes, yes, that this is ideal for him is about he goes to sleep about 5:30 a.m. or 6 a.m. and wakes up about 1 p.m., 2 p.m.
Oh my
So
gosh.
you know, so if you wanted to do a podcast episode, there are plenty of night owls
Okay,
out there
good.
who would be into that. And it's
Wow.
really but it's really interesting because what you said about I don't care who you are, you can't change it. I actually fly in the face of that because I used to be a real night owl.
Really?
And yeah, yeah, yeah. Used to be, I mean, my house in college was the house that everybody came to at 4 o'clock in the morning, and they'd knock on my door and I'd make them nachos and hot chocolate and we'd sit up till 6 a.m. talking. And then once I started working, I stopped being able to do that. And then
Right.
over the last since we moved to New York City, it's come back a little bit. And it feels like I've shifted, but not because I forced myself into shifting because I work for myself and I work from home, but because there's so much to do here in New York that's in the evenings that my awareness has
Mm.
shifted. So some of it for me is my environment is you know, like you said about being creative. I have pictures and I have I don't know, candles and I have artwork. I get artwork from wherever I travel if I can.
Mm.
And so that's all part of my space because I do look for it to it for inspiration. And at the same time, I think we all have to sort of follow your lead a little bit more because this idea of allowing yourself inspiration and creativity through a certain amount of structure, that's how you get stuff done. Because if you're creative all over the place, but you're not structuring your life in such a way that you actually do things, then you're spinning your wheels really fast, but you haven't gotten anywhere.
And you're right. And that's also tough right now, I think, for everyone. Everyone is going through this because even though I'm a night owl and I would prefer to always be creative in the quiet time of the evening,
Sure.
my family has come to me over the last couple of days and said to me, "We really miss you not being with us. Whenever you're here, you go off and do your work when we're all done with dinner." And it's kind of that's my go time. But
Hmm.
I'm seeing that it's the time my family needs me most.
Right.
And what's ironic about that is I it's funny because on a regular day, regular in air quotes, when husband goes off to his 9 to 5 in another location, kids get on school buses, I go to either my rent office or I start work at home. Then I check the box all day of my responsibilities and my work and all the things, as a parent, a mom, and an entrepreneur does. And then at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, when dinner's over, I feel like I'm done. So I get or I choose to go into my creative zone. But that's exactly opposite the time when my family needs me to be more present. And so everyone has this challenge, whether it's happening in their environment, in their physicality, in their, I forget what the word is in Ayurveda. It's like your dosha. It's like who you are and then who your environment is. And so we're all trying to navigate this. And if you're winning, please take notes and share them with the rest of us.
Absolutely. And because it is, I think, I don't even remember if this was in the previous non-recorded part of our conversation or if it was our recorded part of our conversation, but you know, our generation hasn't had this. We haven't had
Right.
to deal with this, such a sudden turn in everything. And people who are older, who lived through the aftermath of World War II, like my mother, you know, she's kind of like, yeah, this is just what you have to do, and
Right.
that's it.
Right.
And I'm wanting to, you know, rage against the machine, but you can't rage against the machine. The orders are pretty clear: stay inside, stay safe, stay healthy, don't get anybody else sick, and try to not get yourself sick. So
Now,
great.
wait, I have to ask you, are you wanting to do that because you are naturally a creative person that has to be out to get inspired and get creative? Or you want to rage against the machine because you don't like being told what to do?
No, I actually, it's funny. I have no problem with being told what to do if it's reasonable. You know,
Right, right.
like if you have reasonable reasons for asking me to do something or telling me to do something, then I'm going to totally listen to you because
Sure.
it's reasonable. So no, it's not that I don't like being told what to do. This all makes sense. You know, social distancing, all of that.
Yeah.
It just makes sense. It will save lives. It's saving lives if we do it right. So I'm not worried about that. But there is this, and I've been saying this to everybody, and I feel bad about it, but I'm just going to have to say it. There is a part of me that's really sad that I'm missing springtime in New York. You know, I moved to New York City last June, and so I missed spring, and now I'm here and it's springtime and I can't be in Central Park, and there is a part of me that's going boo-hoo, but at the same time I'm so grateful for my blessings. So that whenever I get into that, grr, I wish I were able to go outside, I remind myself to get into that place of gratitude, and all is well right after
Yeah.
that. So
So for you, it's nature. It's about being out and like taking it all in, especially this time of year where everything's blossoming and coming back to life. I mean, I couldn't imagine not being able to go outside in New York in springtime. They write songs about that.
exactly. Springtime and autumn in New York are the two
Oh,
seasons you want to be out there. But at the same time, you know, we because we've all had to shift how we're doing things, and recognizing that there are people who don't have that ability, who don't have the luxury of shifting how they're doing what they're doing, and the essential workers
mhm,
who are doing such an incredible job keeping us safe and healthy and keeping the food supply going. The people who can shift, well, this is such an opportunity to
mhm,
do that, and to dig it inside ourselves and decide what is it that I can offer. You know, what is it that I can give to other people to ease their burdens? Because that's what I have right now. I'm able to offer music or this podcast or whatever it is that I can offer, I want to offer. And I know you do the same thing. You've got this wonderful podcast, and you've talked to some of the most incredible people in space and in you know, just looking at the science of it all and looking at how we study our environment and our local neighborhood, right, our solar
mhm,
system. All of that, it can inform everything we do, because it's them's the facts, ma'am. You know, that's how that's kind of how it is. So I'd love to talk with you a little bit about the podcast, about Casual Space, and see what has happened, how it has evolved, and where it is now, and if you can, where you envision it going now that we are in this, and I'm going to keep calling it the new normal because we don't know how things are going to fall out after this. But I'd
right.
love to know what's happening with it, and where do you see it going?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'll give you the evolution of the podcast, but first I have to tell you that your words just now, to be of service to others and give your talents to help them through this time, is not at all what was my perspective when I was doing my work. So I'm going to take that and put that on my wall, because I have to tell you, there's been some trying, tough days where I think, and a lot of people are there, and you're thinking to yourself, but especially as an entrepreneur, will I survive this? Will it look the same on the other side? If so, how am I going to shift or evolve or pivot? But you can still find ways, just like you said, to be of service to others. And whether it's reading Pride and Prejudice or, for me, just sometimes it's just about truly laughing and geeking out. And the other day, talk about if I could have one weird skill, like if you were to say, oh, I know this one girl, she can put her elbow, to the shoulder blade in her back, like something really weird. My talent is to take anything at all, anything, and relate it to space. And I don't know where this came from, but I've done it my whole life. I can still do it. I no longer work for NASA, but you'd never know it. So the other night I was baking and I'm showing everyone on Facebook Live, like what I'm making. I was making like orange zest cookies or something. And I'm talking somehow about how I'm baking relates to the International Space Station. You can see it outside. Go to spotthestation.gov. I mean, I'm doing a quick A to B, point here, but that's just how I work. That's my talent. So the evolution of the podcast is one that showcases that talent for me. So when I came into it, I started it just because as a speaker, as a space advocate, when I was brought into audiences and companies that wanted to hear my message and talk about space and innovation and research and R&D, I would love to deliver these keynotes and workshops. And then after they were over, these people, lots of folks would come up to me afterwards and they wanted to share a dialogue, a conversation. They had anecdotal stories about space. They had relatives who knew relatives who, cousins, uncles, sisters, brothers, helped the astronauts when they, were taken out of the ocean and the capsule was put on the Navy ship. And I knew the guy who did that. I mean, everyone has a space inspiration story or something wonderful that they just wanted to share with me because they were so excited and inspired. And we all have space within us in matter, literally and figuratively. And
Sure.
They just wanted to talk about that. And there was no place for that to live. And so I went back and I decided if I start a podcast, these stories from the folks who I meet on stage and off and everywhere in between, that's where these are going to live. I never thought with my short list of 10 initial guests, I had 10 guests because they say when you start a podcast, think of 10 people. If you're going to do an interview-based show or a podcast that's, more than one person, think of 10 guests that would be able to come on the show and serve as great, conversations. Oh my gosh. Well, 10 was a stretch at first, and now I have 10 every week soliciting to be on the show.
That's wonderful.
It is because so many of us, you and me and our neighbor down the street and down the hall, we all have a space story. You and I talked about when we're going to do our critique of our sci-fi movies. Oh,
yay!
Right?
That's going to be so much fun.
Sci-fi is just the start, because if you're familiar with science fiction and you love space and science fiction, then you already love space and you love technology and you love innovation. So you're already there just because you're enjoying it. And so if we can talk about that on the podcast. So I'm sorry, I ramble and you can just slap me back into the question, which was, how is it evolving? So 10 folks. And then after I really got down like the system of the podcast, like how to solicit guests and invite them to the show. And thanks to you, Isolde, how to really be a great interviewer and how to ask the questions that all of us want to listen to the answer to. And you did that for me, by the way. So wonderful.
I'm so humbled to hear you say that. Wow.
Totally. And then I had this privileged opportunity of, well, it's kind of funny. I just asked guests to come on the show and they said yes. Because I think this show has these 4 key elements that everyone can say yes to. It's jobs. So every week I highlight a job in the space community that's available right now. Because if I'm going to talk the talk, I want to walk the walk. I want to show people that there's untraditional jobs, like beyond the lab coat scientist that you think works at NASA. There's so many things in between that are in space industry that you can apply your skills to. So we highlight jobs. I highlight I try to be entertaining.
And you are.
Thank you. And we try to be educative and informative because a lot of people, like, I don't have to know astrophysics to have an astrophysicist on the show. We have a conversation because we're both related and united in our space geekery, so that's what it's all about. And so the evolution of the show continues. I've had some amazing guests, and I originally started it to say, let's just have these conversations together and let's enjoy conversations. Now that's turned into everything from folks asking me to host their space-based event, whether it's like a startup and they're making an announcement, or it's a major conference, or it's something bigger. And that's wonderful because if I can host a conversation on a podcast, I can certainly host it on a stage, or let's hope so. And it's also turned into these beautiful spin-off conversations on the side. Andy Aldrin was a guest a few weeks ago. I know, because I asked and he said yes. It's amazing. And he has ties to two programs, the International Space University and a program in Florida that he helps run that's part of the Florida University it's a master's only in space business and space commerce. And so, you start going down these rabbit holes as you meet the guests, and you get to decide, and so do my listeners. If you want to go to a website and learn more about a guest or a topic, great. And I encourage that. But I've done the same as a host. When I got to speak with Andrew Aldrin, he's like, what we really could use is a lecture about why space matters at the International Space University at the end of the master's program, like part of their gradulatory, degree. And I thought, I would be honored, and why aren't you doing that? Like, you are way more qualified, Mr. Aldrin. But he is all about the business of space. And I find that so interesting. And you can delve into the business of space as deep as you want to go. And I tell you, it's deep, like space commerce is a whole thing. So I get to read books from authors and get inspired by artwork, by sci-fi writers and painters and illustrators. I've had those folks on the show. So it's interesting because your question is like, how has the show evolved? Every time a guest comes on, that is what takes it to the next place. It kind of is driven itself based on the guests I bring on. And I love that because it's like, it's never the same. It's always a different conversation. And I'm learning. I hope my guests are learning, because when I'm done, when I speak to you, when I speak to Andrew, when I speak to the illustrators and authors, engineers, and everyone, be a scientist, my heart is so full. And I feel like I just did a crash course master's program. I'm like, wow. Dr. Sarah Wallace was this week. She's a microbiologist who was the first, she and her team, to sequence DNA on the International Space Station.
Amazing.
I know. And so when I come into that every single episode, and I'm just like blown away every time, that's how this program has evolved. So it's definitely grown a platform and a community. We have a lot of folks on Facebook, and we're on LinkedIn, and now I'm trying to get more and more on Instagram. And I love when the community starts weighing in and they share. And so now the platform has gone from off the stage into a podcast, and now on social media. So this has been a wonderful evolution. I hope it continues. I did the math. In November for my birthday, I can't think of a better gift than to say to the world, I will have celebrated my 100th episode of Casual Space.
That's wonderful. Yay!
Right?
It's so wonderful because it's the spirit of curiosity. It's being curious about space. And it's funny, as I was listening to you talk, I don't know anybody who hasn't stared up at a starry sky and wondered. And I think that's, from the very beginning of humans who had the ability to look up and wonder, we've been wondering about what's up there. And so you are taking it to the next level, of course, by how do I put this in a way that sounds like I'm sane? It's not as technical as some other conversations might be,
Mhm.
and therefore it's super relatable to the people who are listening, and then they build on what you're doing, and then you get to have this wonderful conversation that's not just the podcast. It's greater than the sum of its parts, which I think is incredible.
Thank you. Would you say it's almost casual?
It's almost, yes. I would say yes, quite.
Space.
It's in fact quite casual. No, and it's funny what you said about this idea of being inspired, and how the community has done it through science fiction and things like that. When we do have to have an in-depth discussion about the movie Contact. I can't wait to do
Yes.
that. But from what I understand, the guy who invented the flip phone did it because of watching Star Trek and seeing the communicators.
Yes.
And
Yes.
how many things have been invented because somebody else was curious about it and turned it into a book or a TV show or a movie, and then from there that was the springboard to making it a reality, to the International Space Station, to satellites, to Voyager. For Pete's sake, that's out somewhere in the Kuiper Belt going, I'm sending you back data, and we're getting
No.
to see so much that we otherwise would not be able to see, and learn more about our place in this solar system and in the galaxy. And so when you talk to these guests, what drives your conversation? What are you thinking when you're like, oh, I'm gonna talk to this person? Is it more an exploration, or is it more directed than that? What
Mm.
guides how you develop the creative aspect of developing each episode?
Well, that is such a good question because I think there's three things. Number one, I'm just going to be totally real, ego. And what I mean by that is I always do my homework. I always do my homework. If there's a book that person's written, I try to read it, the whole thing as best I can. If there's several, I can't read them all, but I try to, at least get their tone and read them. I'm sorry, Isolde, I can't read all your books. You have so many books.
That's okay.
I'll get there. I will get there. You know what? I'll help you audio narrate them if you need to, and then I'll read them.
Woohoo!
So ego is one of them because let's be honest, everyone loves, talking about themselves. And so especially if you're an accomplished illustrator, if you're an accomplished scientist, if you or your team have done something that's moved the needle in science exploration or in humanity, for goodness sakes, let's call it out and let's recognize it. That's first and foremost. The second thing that drives it is our mutual love for space exploration. And I really mean that. I mean, there have been some people who do space policy and space law and like some highly technical stuff. And you'd be amazed. Well, you wouldn't, this. And I think people are amazed how they just melt into having this genuine, sincere, almost childlike conversation about their mutual love for space. And so I kind of sometimes find that mutual ground right off the bat. And sometimes that is a movie or a book or something relevant in the news that kind of just grounds us all and says, hey, did you see the eclipse the other night or that full moon? And then they just start gushing, oh my gosh. And we start from there. It's a great place to start because it's something shared, it's something worldwide, it's science-based, and it's one of those undeniable influential things that we just agree how wonderful it is. And then the third thing is, like you said before, because I'm so curious and because they want to share what they're doing, there's another part I think that underlies the curiosity, which is I feel obligated, and I've always said this since day one. It's why I became a speaker. It's why I do the podcast. It's a level much deeper than just putting it out there each week. I wanted young women who were like me in the middle of the Midwest, who don't live on a space coast, to know that if you love space and science, there's a place for you. There's always a place for you to be recognized, to be curious. And I want to highlight those guests to share their stories and their adventures and their journeys and their challenges so that everyone who thinks, it's not for me or I can't relate, they're wrong. Because if I had heard a woman, anyone from the Midwest who was an average student who struggled through math and science become a NASA representative and eventually go on to work for the International Space Station. This is me, by the way. If I had heard that back in 8th grade or 6th grade, oh my God, I would have like carved my path. But I kept stabbing in the dark because I had no idea that that was possible. There was no one to look at and show, put a pin on my wall or a poster and say, oh, that person did it. There's very few, very, very few. But that's also why I do it, because these conversations are people whose journeys are so unique that when they share them, you're like, I never would have thought. Oh, like 2 weeks ago, here's a great one. Her name is Kelly Larson. She's the CEO of a space startup called Aquarian Devices. She was a lifelong yoga instructor and business entrepreneur. She's now the CEO of a space company because, right? Who can a person who's studying yoga right now go out and hear that podcast and be like, I could be involved in a space-based industry position right now today? Yes, it's so crazy, absurd that I revel in hearing it. I'm like so happy that her story was showcased. How many times have you watched Hidden Figures and you say to yourself, wait a minute, I worked at NASA. How is it I've never heard this story?
Right.
How is it, right?
Absolutely. I had never heard the story. Never.
It's crazy. Me too. And I think to myself, okay, that is part of your responsibility on the podcast, is to bring these narratives out of these folks so that everyone who's coming into these ideas, what if a kid is sitting in his class and he's like, I'm such a good illustrator and I'll never be anything more than an illustrator, but it's too bad that I can't love and mirror my love for space and my great talent for, drawing. Nope, there's a place for you. There is a place for you today. So just hurry up, grow up so you can get started. So that's the podcast. That's a big part of it. It's the other parts too, but thank you for asking. It's really what drives me.
I think it's wonderful that it does. And I have questions, so many questions, but I want to say something that sort of calls back to what you were talking about with Andrew Aldrin asking you to come speak at the International Space University. I think part of that is because he was wise enough to realize that even if he has more, academic qualification or whatever, that you, as a woman in science and in space science, are uniquely qualified in many ways to be that envoy. You are the person in that way who can make it accessible and also serve as a role model to the young women who are coming up in the world and going, wait, she did it. I can follow a similar path. That's crucial. And it's funny, when I go into schools, one of the things the teachers inevitably tell me is how thrilled they are for their girl students, third grade girls, how thrilled they are for them to see a woman in science and that it's okay and that it can be super fun.
Yes.
Because that still is something that a lot of girls growing up, second, third, fourth, fifth grade, they don't see a lot of that. So the more we can be out there and talking about this as if it's doable, because it is, the better it is for us now and for the future, because these kids are tomorrow's decision makers, they're tomorrow's leaders, they're tomorrow's creators, they're tomorrow's thinkers and innovators. And the more we can give them the tools to do it, I think the better we all are going to be.
Well said.
And well, thank you for springing it up. That was all due to your comment and point about it. And I do want to ask you something you said struck a chord in me. You were saying that the science in that way drives the podcast, but it also, I think, from what I understand about you, that it drives your life. It drives the way you make decisions outside of the work you do. And I would love to hear a little bit, if you're willing to share, about your viewpoints on us as a society, as a world, and our relationship to science. What do you think it is now, and where do you think it needs to go in order for us to keep thriving?
Oh, This is just getting me so excited. Can you see the hair standing up on the back of my head? Because they're like straight. I think now more than ever, we have seen firsthand in an unfortunate pandemic that science needs to be first. Science needs to be in our everyday lives, and it needs to be recognized top down. And I mean at the highest level in our political system, and I mean in everything that we read and do and look around. And people might be like, okay, well, you're a geek and you're asking a lot, and that's just not how everyday lives work. I disagree. And I'm going to quote Adam Frank, who is an astrophysicist, brilliant, who said so eloquently, you cannot buffet style pick your science. I totally probably did not get that captured correctly, but he did say it. I'm sure he's written about it many times. He's a fantastic writer, professor, and so much more. And he's right, because you can't have an antibacterial soap and say that you don't agree with climate change. You can't have a cell phone that you use to communicate with everyone in the world and not think that, you have a footprint on this earth that is, impacting nature. I don't understand how people can't, and I think it's because we're not science literate. I think there's a lot of us who, I don't know if we didn't study it in school or we didn't continue learning about it as we left school. I don't know if it's buried in page 5 and 6 of the papers and it's way deep down on the digital media. And let's be honest, we just don't value science sometimes because it's not convenient. We enjoy the conveniences that science brings to us, our filtered water and air, our, tinted sunglasses that protect our eyes from harmful rays. These are all the things science brings us that we benefit from. But a big part of what is such a challenge when it comes to space science in particular is investing now for years down the road, sometimes decades down the road. And if you can't believe or acknowledge or respect science, that's a hard sell. But if you want to be around enjoying the comforts of your life in 10 to 20 years, you have to invest in it now. I don't know how else to say it. What do you think?
You and I are of one mind here. I think that what it's asking of people is being able to and willing to think long term, to be willing and able to take short-term actions to plan for long-term survival, gains, thriving, and a society that works in 20, 30, 50, 100 years. And that, I think, can be a hard sell because we, so many of us are, I'm trying to put food on the table today. I don't want to think about tomorrow, or I can't afford to think about tomorrow because I'm too busy doing this. And I think that this pandemic in many ways is going to, by necessity, change some of the way we look at this stuff. We have to prepare differently. We have to think differently. We can no longer think today. We have to think tomorrow and 3 years from now. Yes.
Well, the good news is that your farmers are thinking 10 to 20 years from now. The people who are distributing the farm produce to you have been thinking 10 to 20 years from now. So why can't we? I mean, they have to think about agriculture in a whole new way. They have to think about sanitation in a whole new way. Everyone has to think a little differently right now. And coming out of this, we will. And that is the good news. We will be forced to be more innovative. Here's a painful reality. I have to be forced to learn my children's educational platforms, digital platforms. It's painful. It hurts my brain and my eyes. And yet, if I don't, when my kids come to me with an issue, a concern, a problem, they can't get through something that the teachers assigned, if I'm not familiar with how they're going to operate on a digital platform in their education system, that's on me. And I want to evolve into that. It's not easy. I don't like it. I feel those discomforts. But my husband and I were just laughing the other day, and we said, gosh, we're here in the home doing our darndest to try to get our kids off screens, right? We're trying to like get them to have breaks from their eyes and go outside. And yet, right now, all of school is digital. Most of
Yeah.
school, in most places. I know not everyone's privileged, and I do want to recognize that to everyone have a digital platform. I do. But for those of us who are moving forward or have those requirements and we're staying at home and we're still needing to do school, we have to evolve. The kids have to learn this digital learning platform, and so do I. So, yeah, I feel like it does hurt, but the good news is it's forcing us all to hurt in a way that's an investment in science and in our future that will be our benefits years to come. And if that doesn't exactly parallel into space exploration, I don't know what is. You know, I know there's folks on the political advisory team that said we were way overdue for a pandemic of this scale, way overdue. It was predicted to have come a couple of years ago.
Right.
And so why weren't we prepared again? I'm not sure. Maybe we were not prepared at this scale. I don't know. But we have to think now, from now forward, we have to start thinking a little more long term in all that we do.
Absolutely. You know, amen. I couldn't agree more. No, seriously, because the idea of just for today, it doesn't it doesn't hold. We can't do that anymore. We have to think, we have to plan and think much more for the long term, because this isn't the only pandemic. I'm sorry to say it, but if we don't make some serious changes in how we as a planet, as a global population do things, this isn't the only one we're going to have. There's no way to make sure it doesn't happen again unless we make some major changes. And it brings me back to something you said about science. And I think one of the things that I worry about with adults right now, as well as children, is confidence. I feel like it's not just science aware, it's science confident. It's having confidence in not just in science, but in your ability to understand it and to work within those frameworks. I think those kinds of connections and that level of awareness is so important to start. Like you're working with your kids and you're helping them learn. All of a sudden, within a week and a half, you had to learn how to do this, and it's like you said, it's hurting your brain, it's hurting your eyes, but you have to, in order to be able to guide them as they operate now, as they learn now. And I'm sure your kids are pretty science confident, knowing who you are and how you operate. But at the same time, look at all of the people, especially students, who don't have that. And so having any kind of framework where they can think about making the connections, like you mentioned farmers, and I think the way I look at it is farmers don't think daily, they think seasonally.
Mhm.
And the trouble with this is, and I'm going to get very serious for a minute, one of my dear friends is the executive director of a nonprofit that works with farmers a lot. And she's told me that one of the staggering statistics that they have learned about is the high rate of suicide among farmers.
No.
Oh, it's been quite, it was, I was shocked, but she said, yeah, they are not thanked for being such the crucial part of the food supply chain. And we don't appreciate that, in part because the kids and the adults and most of us, we don't tend to go, I wonder where this potato came from. You don't tend to think that. You're like, these are my French fries and I like them, and that's how it is. So one of the things, I'm vegan, but when I can, I get a little vegan burger and some French fries at Five Guys. And one of the things that I love about Five Guys, because they have a little vegan vegetable sandwich and they have amazing fries. But one of the things I
Yes, they
love,
do.
I know, no affiliate links, I promise. I just love their fries. But anyway, the thing is that if you walk into a Five Guys every day, they have a little sign up that says today's French fries came from such and such farm in Idaho or wherever the farm is. And excuse me. And I just love that that's even that little touchstone of, this is where your French fries came from. This is
Mhm.
where the potatoes grew. It's an acknowledgement of the farms and the farmers. That's even a little acknowledgement is better than nothing. And
My
right
kids love
now,
that too. They
uh,
love that. They think it's silly and also very interesting. They're like, why do we need to know where this potato came from? And yet, where is that place in
right?
Idaho? And then they say to me, Mom, don't all potatoes all come from Idaho?
Well, I will say that I've tried growing potatoes, and I'm really glad that Idaho grows potatoes, because it would have it was not good. It did not
You
come out
just
well.
get spuds.
Oh, it was no, I didn't even get that. I got it was we got, I think, 4 little tiny potatoes that tasted great, but if we were trying to get any kind of a good yield for our crop, we would have been sorely disappointed. So, but
Well, let's go back to what you said about this fine, it's a fine line, right? Between science confidence and science literacy. You know,
yeah,
when you get your cell phone and you just use it, that's using science.
sure.
But it takes a little bit more, let's all agree, if you want to use the apps, if you want to set a timer, if you want to have a specific package based for you on how you're going to use the phone. And so you got to go a little bit deeper to get the benefit the most out of what you're going to invest in. That comes with any electronics, same with your car. And I'll be the first one to admit, like, I will not read the manual on my car. I will service it very routinely and diligently, but I'm not about to like learn how this particular part relates to the wholeness of my car. But there is something to be said about when you have an expectation and you have a science knowledge behind it, then you're not only more informed, but then that brings the confidence. And so this can be applied in anything. And it's a fine line. It's really, really fine. And what I mean by that is when we're talking about human behavior, when we're talking about the human genome, when we're talking about this crisis and how viruses spread. I mean, plug in any science you want. There's a societal cultural stance that shows you how much of the science we're going to be accepting, right? Like we're going to accept that some humans are this way and other humans are that way and some are born that way and some are made that, right? That's a fine, right? It's like,
Sure.
okay, culture is going to help dictate some of that. And then, you know, sometimes religion does, sometimes nature does. I mean, a million different ways. And then you can plug in any other science. Like sometimes you can say, okay, we're going to say that we're going to recognize there is climate change, but we're only going to recognize it when it's convenient for us. And especially if we're a major corporation that has certain emissions going into our airs and waters, then we're only going to limitedly recognize this in the way that benefits our production. So yeah, I mean, everything is kind of weighing in on science, and I don't like that. I think
Hmm.
science is, you can't pick a side. You just, it's just what it is. So you don't get to like choose. You don't get to say, well, sometimes climate change or sometimes benefits to my life in ways that I choose to be beneficial. Nope. Guess what else comes with all of the benefits of your home? If you choose to not change the filter on your air purification system or your air conditioning in your home, there will be some science. It's not a questionable thing. It's not like a quality thing. It's purely science that things will happen in the environment you'll get mold, you'll get allergens, you'll get dust and dirt buildup. That's not like perhaps that's a definite thing, and you can't blame the air conditioner brand. You know,
Right.
so I can point. There's a million ways you can point to this, but when it comes from leadership, when it comes from politics, when it comes from people at the top who are making decisions to influence the science and then influence the rest of us, let's be honest, that's how the trickle down of our science literacy, and I feel really strongly about this, can hinder our science confidence. So when
Absolutely.
there's, yes, right, when there's publications out there that are showing us trends, let's go back to farmers. I can't imagine how hard it might be for them to look at future trends that our weather patterns are going to be more and more and more severe, and the pendulum is going to swing onto these really cold, times, and then these really hot, humid, and droughts and everything in between. That's our weather pattern and systems right now. And depending on where you live, it can be more extreme than that. And that's science. So how do you embrace that? And if you're going to showcase that this is the science and publish it, but certain people will not choose to publish it, and certain people will not choose to recognize it, or certain politicians will not choose to put money invested towards that. Oh my gosh, that is where the breakdown starts between being science literate and science confident. And you can't be science confident if it doesn't come from the very, 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 very top, or if it's not in the schools, or if it's not in your life every day, because then you're just going to, then if you're not being subjected to privileged information about it around you, and if you have to work really hard to get the right, or I don't want to say right, I mean the true science, then what are you going to spend your time doing? Are you going to be surviving as a farmer, or are you going to have to go find the science? Who gets to choose that? That's not a choice I want to ever have anyone to make. Science should be in front of us and present and so evident that that's how we are. And I know this is a bigger philosophical question, but if we could embrace, I think Neil deGrasse Tyson came out with a book called something War, and it was all based on, how we've explored the stars because of war. Mm-hmm. I forget what it's called, the name of his book. But imagine if we were a peaceful planet and we explored the stars in a different way. And in many ways we have, but in many ways territorial, political, foundational safety, cultural pride. These are reasons why we've explored both the oceans and the new lands and the stars. But what if science, like just the pure curiosity of science, was what the reasons why we wanted to go? And I think Voyager was that. I really think so. I think Light Sail is that. I think there's a lot of things you can point to, but I don't think the shuttle was that. I don't think the International Space Station is that. I wish we could say it was. I worked on the program and I did say it was pure science, but it's not. There's so many politics behind that. And I see that now being older and wiser. I need to stop talking because I could go on and on about all these.
Oh no! Really? Please do not stop talking. It's so. This is a conversation we all need to be having and listening to and participating in. And it's so fascinating to me what you said about the idea of science needs to be there every day. I'm going to take it a step further and say I think science is there every day. It's what we lack on the whole, and not singling out anybody, but it's the awareness that science is there every day. If you want to make tea and you put your teapot on the stove and you boil the water, that's science. That you can't get away from that, so it's there, but we don't tend to stop and think about it. That's why that idea of these French fries came from this farm in Idaho. One of the things that I do with kids when I first start is I ask them, what did you have for breakfast? Well, I had cornflakes. Okay, well, where did cornflakes come from? And almost always they go, the store. Okay, so but where do they come? And we have to get back to the place of that somebody grew the corn in the soil, and then that corn, which is a resource hog and needs a lot of water, somebody spent a lot of time watering it and harvested it at just the right time. And all of these steps had to happen in order for that corn to eventually end up in your cornflakes box so you could eat for breakfast today. Knowing that, being able to trace that changes these kids' lives because it's not something we think about. So we can talk about farming, we can talk about space exploration, we can talk about the physics of tying your shoes. Any of that is going to have to be related to our everyday lives with an awareness that it's there because it's already there. How do you feel about that? What are your thoughts on that?
You're right. I think it takes special teachers and special moments, like right now with this virus, for us to stop and realize that perspective of what you just shared. Because I learn when they turn on the TV. I mean, do we know what a virus is? Of course we do. Do we know how it works? Of course we do. But it seems like, and maybe it's just me, it seems like the doctors on the television are re-explaining to us at a very basic level. Remember, a virus works like this. It infects you like that. It's airborne like this. It travels because you've touched something that contains the virus and then touches your face and your eyes. And I feel like, don't we already know this? Well, maybe we need the reminder. And those guides, those people, doesn't have to be a scientist. It can be an agricultural expert. It can be a trend. It can be a white paper. It can be a report. It can be a teacher, especially a teacher. And thank you to all the teachers. It can be YouTube, showing us what you just said, the connection between tying your shoe, the teapot on your stove, and everything in between. Yes, is science. And in many ways, you and I serve as those advocates too. And maybe that's what drives us and why we're so passionate, because it is everywhere. You're right. When I think of getting on my pulpit, I'm thinking of like in mass media. Like I really think of, but where does it exist there? It's so non-existent there. It's not, I'll buy 16 magazines right now at any store, anywhere, and not one of them will have, unless it's Time, or unless it's Newsweek, perhaps, or unless it's like Astronomy Today or Scientific American. If I'm lucky to get one of those in my hands, or maybe National Geographic, that's it. That's lucky, right? And that we have to really go get that, unless you subscribe to those things or you live in those places where you can get those on your phone if you choose to have those kind of things. But it's those navigators, it's those guides that I want more of, so that during this coronavirus, it would be great if we had like a host like communicator, and then I would say journalist, but sometimes it's a host, doctor, and then the news, and then it's almost like we need a scientific guide or a navigator to say, okay, let's walk through the science of this, because it's easy right now to get emotionally crazy and overwhelmed with like the cultural part of this, the economic part of this, all the repercussions that we're all going to experience together. But I feel like if we start at the science, people might take a deeper breath. I don't mean that literally. I mean they might just say, if I understand this fundamentally, I'm going to be okay staying in my home. I'm going to be okay taking one for the team. I'm going to be okay, waiting to have an elective surgery until maybe next year if I can afford to do so, because there's way more things that, need to come first right now. If we were to understand the science just a little bit better, it's the same thing when we talk about vaccinations and the herd immunity, all of that. It all kind of, and how many of us were really misinformed just a few years ago about a vaccination. Do you remember when we had the, I don't want to say SARS, it was back in 2009, and it was a terrible influenza-based, what was that?
Was that swine?
Yes, swine flu. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I just had my daughter in 2009. She wasn't even a few months old. I knew nothing about it. Shame on me. A person who's a science journalist, me. And I'm in line. I was purely emotionally driven to protect my daughter. I lined up at my high school and with everyone else, and they talk about a really bad idea. If there's like all of us gathering in one place to spread the germs. But I was like the first person in line over there, standing outside in the cold rain, waiting to get a vaccine I really knew nothing about. But I thought to myself, I'd do anything for this kid. I'm just going to follow the herd and get in line, because if this is one way of a guarantee to just kind of, have something in my pocket of assurance, then I'm going to do it. And oh my God, I was so science illiterate. And yet there I was. And here I can't believe I'm saying this and sharing it, but it was out of fear, emotion, mama bear, was all of it,
But what's really funny about what you just said, and I don't mean to make light of it, but it is really funny to me that you're thinking in terms of separating them, because frankly, the idea of being a mama bear and wanting to do anything to protect your baby, that's biology, that's science. It is still science based. I mean, you and I can talk forever. It's kind of like you said, your superpower was being able to relate anything back to space, and we can relate anything back to science just following those steps. But at the same time, the thing that I think strikes me most about what you said was I realized that it was going to be for her safety, and I was just going to do it because of that. It had to be done, and I was going to do it. And it's the same in many ways with where we are right now. The best thing to do to save you can do whatever you want with yourself, but the problem is that you are not an island. No one here is an island, and we all have a responsibility. We all have a role to play here. And so having that be as a treated as a positive is the way to go. And this is something, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this. This makes me a little crazy. And normally I'm not quite as political on this show, so I'm really grateful to you for bringing all of this up so we can talk about it.
Uh-oh, let me sit
No,
down.
yeah, seriously. So it was about a week and a half ago or so. There were certain people who were coming out with these pronouncements that older people should get out and back to work, and that if you're a grandparent, that it's okay if you go back to work, because what you really are trying to do is save the economy for your grandchildren. Did you see any of this in the news?
Gosh, I'm so glad I didn't, but I'm listening to you now and it's just boiling my blood. But
it was basically geared towards baby boomers. and
mhm.
and if you have, I'm going to name names. Glenn Beck was one of the people who came out with this, and several other people who were saying this, and the lieutenant governor of Texas
Okay.
was also quoted as saying that, I'm a grandparent, and I think we should all get back to work because we need to save the economy. And I remember going on social media and just saying, dear grandparents and baby boomers and anybody who's a little older, you do not have to do this to save the economy. That is not what's important right now. But it was really interesting to me and it quieted down. Enough people, I think, came out and said, you people are just nutcases if you're saying this. And I think that it just sort of went away. Their calls for people to get back to work, because it's bananas to say that, to go, oh, we should have, older people should get back to work to save the economy for the future. The economy will recover. We need to make sure that everybody's okay and are staying at home, because not staying at home is going to be so much worse, not just for the people who don't stay home, but for everyone the world over. Because again,
Mhm.
this is how viruses work. They don't discriminate. That this virus is indiscriminate. It does not care. I read something the other day that was so brilliant, written by an epidemiologist, and he said this virus is unforgiving to unwise choices. And
Ooh,
I thought that was brilliant. It was
yeah.
brilliant. So we all, I think, have a responsibility to make the wise choices here. And the wise choices are, like you were talking about, herd immunity and vaccinating your children, or in this time and during this pandemic, staying at home, sheltering in place, so that we can, everybody's saying lower the curve, lower the curve. But if we're flattening the curve, that means, let's call it what it is. Flattening the curve means fewer people suffering and dying. It's not, we can talk about it in terms of science and math, but we also can talk about it in terms of flattening the curve has a very specific meaning here. It means fewer people will suffer and die,
Mhm.
period. You
Yeah.
know? and
Yeah.
and sometimes I think when we get uh these phrases, oh, this is the descriptor, we're going to flatten the curve, people can kind of almost ignore it because it's just a phrase. Oh, flatten the curve. No, 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 no. Flatten the curve means fewer people die. That's what it
I
means,
know.
you
Yeah.
know?
And we're all going to have to pivot. We're going to have to pivot in every way. I mean, every way, socially, economically, spiritually, the way we parent, the way we have our habits, the way we spend our money, the way we are kinder, I hope. And I really hope,
Absolutely.
if I can, because I think I've been and you have been in a space-based industry and you're familiar, you know that these long-term investments do pay off. And so if we would be foolish to look at this right now and rush through it, we would be really foolish. What we should be doing, I hope what we are doing very diligently and very patiently and calmly, is taking it step by step, very slowly, assessing as we go, making notes. I mean, this is what NASA does. I always bring everything back to space, I told you. But
I love it.
NASA doesn't just build something and launch it into space and shake hands and call it a day. Every step of the way, they're looking at every detail. And I mean from like, did we use the right material when we built it? Did we have the right team in place to be on board to build it? Did we launch it at the right trajectory? Is it effectively working the way we want it to? Will it continue to do so in the next 10 years? And so we go back and they look at every part of the process, what they're going to learn from it, and how they're going to continue to learn from it. There's a saying unofficially, around NASA that you plan for the unexpected. If it goes well, that's a good day. That's the surprise, because NASA's always training with all what they call anomalies, right? Everything that could go wrong. And I think test pilots work this way as well. Their mentality is like, always think about what's going to go wrong and train for that and train for it. So that in that moment, and Chris Hadfield is like the best NASA spokesperson / astronaut, in my opinion. I just think he's fantastic. But he talks about, when you're in the moment and this horrible thing is going wrong, it's not horrible to you. You've trained for it 60 million ways sideways. Buzz Aldrin was able to land on the moon with the lunar lander because he trained extensively over and over and over again. And Neil Armstrong, and they did these evacuation trainings and they crashed it and they didn't successfully land it 1 million times. So were we surprised as a nation and a country when we landed on the moon a little bit? Yes, we were in shock because we had never done that before. But they had 1 million times they probably did it in their sleep. They probably had dreams about it at night. When they hung up their coat each night coming home from work, they're like, in my mind, I'm going to do this again. And so I hope that's what we gain from this experience. I hope, not to say that we have pandemics coming up again or soon, but who would have ever thought after the Dust Bowl of the, what was that, 20s, 40s? When was
30s.
That? 30s, thank you. Oh, I was almost there, right in the middle. Who would have thought that after we got through that, we would have such severe weather pendulum swinging events again? Maybe not that extent and maybe not quite that long, but these things are going to come and they're going to come back in different ways. Our job right now is to take notes, learn from it, and then train for the anomaly again and again and again and again. Mm-hmm. So I hope that folks are doing that. I hope that I'm not going to brag here, but I did something really thoughtful and purposeful, and I don't know how I succeeded in this, but I'm super grateful. We saw this coming, not so much the lockdown, but we kind of got a sense of like, this might get bigger than we don't really know. So as parents, we went to Barnes & Noble and we bought like, oh my gosh, $100 of books that were on my kids' school list, like for fun, for reading, and we just bought them. So don't tell them that they're going to get some for Easter. I've been holding out for a few of those. So I have some of those like in stock, like waiting in the ready to go. And because I'm a planner, I put this jar together of activities each night. Like I just wrote on a piece of paper, family activity idea, threw it in a jar, and I put like 20 in the jar. I never would have thought that my kids' highlight of the day is pulling something out of the family activity jar. Here's an example. So here's my creativeness. Please don't think I have like the Martha Stewart clean home, because while that is like what I prefer, the other day we pulled out of the activity jar the challenge that was to pair off. So a kid and an adult, and we have 2 kids. So my husband and I, he took a kid and I took a kid. And we had to take a chair and put it in the foyer where the ceiling's a little higher and stack as many pillows as possible in 15 minutes. The tallest one wins. And the kids live for this. I mean, like every single pillow in the house came off of whatever and got
Love
stacked
it.
on this chair. And I don't know where I got this foresight, but I hope that's what we're doing right now is we're looking at how we are as humans. We're looking at each other. Okay, we're in survival time right now. So what does that mean? What do I need to do? Let's take notes on that. Let's be observant. And this is like 101 science, right? You have an observation and a hypothesis. And right now the problem is I think there's so many unknowns. When will this end? When will we be safe? When can I come out of my house? When will this occur again? Who's going to be impacted? To what level? Will it be a severe, infection, or will I have to be hospitalized? There's so many unknowns. But you take notes, you plan for the anomalies, you listen to the science of what you know right now, and then you learn from those notes and you implement that later. And if you need help or interpretations, you read the science, you look at it, you study, you learn a little bit, and we're going to be prepared next time. We're going to be even more prepared. We're going to be better. And I wish this could be the message for all of us, at the end of Contact, where she says, I wish this for all of you. And she's like that for just that one moment, you could feel how truly insignificant and yet precious we all are. Did I do a good job? Because I know you know the movie.
No, you did perfect.
Is that good? Well, that's us right now. My wish is that we take notes, learn this anomaly, work through it together, and come out the other side better scientists. Because we can.
Absolutely we can. And what you just said is so I wanna actually put it up on a plaque or tattoo it on the inside of my
Oh,
eyelids
what did I say?
because you said that because of where we are, we can be planning now, we can be learning now, we can be doing research now, we can ask the questions now so that for the future we can be better prepared. I mean, it's that idea of I have a thing that I live for, that I live by, that I wrote in a journal entry years ago, and it was really simple. It was learn from yesterday, prepare for tomorrow, live today. That's it.
So good.
It's so interesting to me whenever I come back to that, because the present moment is all we have, but we can certainly get informed by what we know from before, and we can certainly prepare for what we believe is coming. And there are experts we can look to find some of these answers out. And it's funny what you said about NASA and preparation. The way we were talking about it at Goddard Space Flight Center where I worked was you prepare for failure. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
That was how it worked. You prepare for failure.
Right?
Just prepare for failure, because if it, my sister who's a doctor says Murphy's law is all there is. She's like, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. So
Mm-hmm.
prepare for it. And that idea, what you just said about you know again, it's some of this is confidence, I think, is going, what, I'm starting where I am, wherever that is, and I'm going to take a step forward in asking the questions, in getting the answers, in doing the research, and in preparing. And I get it, that it can be really overwhelming. And here you and I are sitting here talking on a podcast, and we can't know what's going on in someone's home in Arkansas or in
Right.
Oregon or whatever. But at the same time, we're all starting where we are. Wherever you are, you're starting, and you can start right now today to ask the questions, to figure out who you might be able to talk to. And now I'm wondering if you're listening to this and you wonder, where do I go? I think I'm gonna put some links to some websites from the CDC, which is the Center for Disease Control, and places like that, where you can go and get some of this science-based information, get some of these answers, so that if you are uncertain, that there are some resources. Because I think some of this is, you and I are both kind of informed consumers, as it were. And so if you are a person who doesn't know where to even begin, yeah, Google can be your friend, but let's take you somewhere that will have some more science based information that you can
So
look to.
that's so good. I love that you brought in your Goddard example and your sister, your Murphy's Law, because that's so true. And for those people who are feeling overwhelmed, let me remind you that as much as an astronaut has to do, and think about everything they have to do, they have to be physically fit, they have to be smart, they usually have to know every single button, all the systems, they have to learn to speak several languages. I mean, it's never ending, and they're incredibly talented humans. And yet, and yet, they are only focused on what they need to know. They have to rely on NASA and the teams of people back on Earth to help them with everything else. Same thing for you in your home. So when it feels overwhelming right now and you're like, what am I going to do and how does this work? Just work on and just look at the things right in front of you. That is such a great piece of advice, Zolda, because again, and it relates all the way up to the space program, because there's no way an astronaut can go on board and expect to do the science from a particular experiment. Like, yes, they get briefed, but you know what they have to do first? Survive. Survive.
Absolutely.
They have to know how to get up there safely and then get into low Earth orbit, or perhaps someday soon beyond low Earth orbit. We're going there.
Woo-hoo.
But then what's next? They have to keep themselves well fed, well air filtered and water. You know, they have to survive first. Then they get to do all the great things we think astronauts get to do. But even then, when they float over and they're part of their day, when they do an experiment, there's ground members extraordinaire who are telling them, okay, we're going to remind you how this experiment works. We're going to walk you through it. And you're going to be using the tools. Here we go. They have help. And same at your house. You know, if it's overwhelming, again, just stop and call on someone if you need help with, you know, the things we don't usually need to know in our house. If you don't know how to change filters, it's okay right now, in other words, to just survive and know what you know. And then this beautiful invitation that you've said earlier is now is the time to learn. So
Absolutely.
it doesn't mean you have to necessarily learn a new language and learn, you know, how to astrophysics, but learn more about your house, learn more about your environment. Take a walk now through your neighborhood if you can, you know, and learn what's around you if you haven't really taken the time to do that. Learn better how to survive and thrive. Learn about your breathing, your sleeping pattern. Take notice of what you're eating. I mean, that's simple and basic. And then we can plan for the anomalies when they come. Right now, we're kind of in this beautiful cusp of like protective survival and learning invitational opportunities. It's quite a mixture, isn't it?
It really is. And you know, this idea of being, we're on the precipice of something, of a new way of living, I think. And this is not to discount anybody who's going through a rough time or who's in pain or who's suffering. That again, the essential workers and the medical personnel who are taking care of everyone, as many people as they can who are suffering, boggles my mind. But this, what you just said, is something that that we can all be doing. This idea of stepping back and telling yourself that it's going to be okay and starting where you are is so important. And to your point about the astronauts, at one point, every single astronaut faced their first day. Every single one, you know, every single one at one point had none of the knowledge they have now, had none of the expertise they have now. And at one point, years ago, they started. So what they may know now is based on years, sometimes decades of study and of practice. And they were beginners, you know, and this is an opportunity for all of us to have beginner's mind. Start where you are, wherever
It's
that
true.
is. And every day you learn a little bit more, you ask a few more questions, you do a little bit more research so that you build your body of knowledge. Excuse me.
So well said. Very great. I need to learn to be more on social media. What are you going to learn? I need to learn my Instagram.
You know, I know people who can help you with that, and
Oh, good.
and I can help you with that. Yeah. What am I? Well, I'm learning more about where my focus should be, and moving. I've always been of two minds, my creative side and my science side. And I've had friends tell me that I sit at the crossroads of creativity and science. And other friends
Oh,
have told me that I sit at the crossroads of spirit and science. And I love that. And so where what I'm going to be learning is more about how, frankly, I can serve educationally from that space of being creative at the same time having a scientific perspective. And so that's I'm spending
wonderful.
the bulk of my time doing that. And then of course I have this instrument that I call magic. It is a white 5-string violin. Now, I've been playing violin, 4-string violin, regular violin since I was 5 years old. But a 5-string violin, it's a different kettle of corn
Ooh.
completely. So I'm spending time every single day playing this violin because muscle memory is a thing. Science again. Muscle memory helps me play violin, 4-string violin, really well. But
Mhm.
I'm used to certain things happening when my body does things a certain way, and no longer. Now I'm playing a 5-string violin. Things are totally different. So I'm having to unlearn what I know to relearn, and I'm trying to give myself beginner's mind here because I approach it with, well, I know how to do this, and I don't. And I don't. So I am practicing every
Good for
single
you.
day how to play violin in a completely new way. So those are the two things that I'm trying to do. And it's funny because my husband has told me many times, Isolda, you prepare. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, "Yeah, I think you prepare too much." And I said,
Oh.
"Oh, okay." Because I had this big tub that came with us from Maryland to New York City that had uh, meds and gloves and splints and ace bandages, and I have it's my emergency tub with all of this different stuff and masks. I have a box of N95 masks that I bought, and masks that are the chemical masks, the weird ones that
Oh
make you look
yeah.
like you're a space alien. So I had those, and it's really interesting to hear him now. He came to me the other day and he's like, "I wanted to say something." And I said, "Okay." And he goes, "You know how I made fun of you for being too prepared?" And
Oh.
and I and I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "I'm not making fun of you anymore." And I was like, "Okay, good." Because that's some of this is that we now know more about what we need to do next time and
Have you
how we
seen the
need to
movie
approach.
Moana?
I love Moana.
Did you
Yes.
sing? Did you sing to him? Did you say, "You're welcome.
I should
You're
have. I didn't.
welcome"?
That's I'm gonna totally do that. That's great. I had no we should talk about the science behind Moana at some point too. We need to
Oh,
have this
yes.
Beth and Isolda take on
I
science movies.
know.
Oh, we need to do that.
I want to add one last thing before we part, that as much as you have an agenda right now, and it's a wonderful, like you said, invitation to learn. So learning violin, 5-string violin, and being creative and being prepared is a beautiful balance. I was not prepared for what I've learned is that when you have some quiet, my kids are used to the schedule. This time is bad and that time we eat and this is when the bus gets home and all these things. And this is when mom's, going to be, her coffee's kicked in. So there's been this schedule that has fallen away.
Mhm.
And doing that, I did not expect what I have learned. And this is the beautiful, I could just cry. And I really want to share it because I hope other people take advantage of this as well, or at least take observance to this. My daughter is going to be, oh my gosh, in a few more weeks, she's going to be 11.
Wow.
11. I know, it seems like yesterday. And I've struggled all these years to find her love language. What does she speak to? Like, what is her jam? What is unique for her in a way that I can be in touch with that and serve her and love her that way, right? If you've ever heard of those.
Oh, yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
okay. And so It's easy with my son. It's very evident. And so it's kind of like a no-brainer, and I know how that works. But with my daughter, I have just struggled all these years to figure it out, and we finally figured it out. I can't even tell you the joy that's come into my heart. The quietness, and it came out of nowhere. I bake, but I bake purposefully for dinner. I
Uh-huh.
bake for the checklist. I bake to like serve my family food. My daughter bakes to fill her creative intelligence.
Wow.
Yeah. And so for when she bakes, it's everything. It's science, it's creativity, it's measuring, it's learning, and it's, entertainment and joy. It's connecting with her friends. And so on this rare occasion, on the one particular day, we baked together, and then we baked together again the next day. And then we've done it every night, and it has become the love language activity that I never, ever, ever figured out. And it's brought so much joy into my heart, because after we bake, I don't nag her to clean up. She does. Now, in any other situation, her room, her papers, right, her stuff, I have to nag. This
Right.
is like such a natural activity for us both. And as long as I can keep my mouth shut when it comes to like, don't do it that way, do it this way, as long as I let her make all the mistakes you make when you bake. And I have eaten her mistakes, by the way. Any good mom would do that with my poker face.
Absolutely.
When we're done baking, she sits a little closer to me. She talks a little longer with me. And this is a whole new daughter. So I hope in these times of these in-betweens, where schedules aren't scheduled and places aren't to gone to, and, we can't, whoever you're with, whoever it is, or if you have to do a little work here and reach out and get to know a friend a little better, or help a neighbor, whatever. I hope in these quiet times we can find an observational moment. Really, like you said, your beautiful saying of living in it. Because if I had noticed that baking, I mean, of all things, I was hoping it would be space camp. I took her to space camp like 3 years ago, and she could care. Did she have a great time? Yes. Did I have a great time? Yes. But we were like batting heads like goats together down there, and I don't know why. And finally, I figured out that I was wanting her to have a certain experience at space camp. I was wanting something for her
Mm-hmm.
instead of her genuinely having it. And I didn't realize that until it was almost the last day. Oh, so now this ridiculous like baking every night, which, let's be honest, it's heavenly. Every night we're coming up with something that's usually delicious, but I'm so grateful that this crisis always brings opportunity is the same. And it
Yeah.
certainly has at my house, and it certainly has in this particular relationship. And I hope that for everyone, however that appears. And I think part of your job, our job, is to just be a little more open to observe that, because it will come into your life or your heart or your observation. Just be open to it and be kind of looking for it. And you might be surprised.
Absolutely. I love that. I'm so glad that you bake because I'm coming to your house, and as
Come
soon as as
on.
soon as as soon as the quarantine is lifted, I'm coming to your house. Because
They
I do.
say I bake well. They
Well,
say I bake.
believe me when I tell you, I will tell you the horror stories. The next time I'm lucky enough to have you on the show, I will tell you the baking horror stories of my life.
Ooh.
It was not, yeah, it was a home economics teacher thought, "Oh, you're smart. You'll be fine." And she left me to my own devices in baking,
Oh.
and I pretty much set the home ec room on fire. So, uh,
This whole time.
yeah, yeah, so anytime somebody bakes, I'm so full of gratitude because I love baked goods, but I am not a person who can do that. But yeah, I love what you said, and I think it's so true. This is a time, if you have the opportunity, and I think many of us do, to be explorers of our inner space, of our local, very local environment. Even in your apartment, is there a book you haven't read? Is there
Yeah.
a practice
Yeah.
you want to take up? If Do you want to bake? Do you want to start a yoga practice, I don't know, whatever it is, this is an
Yeah.
opportunity for us to really dig deep inside ourselves and find out what, what our personal love language in that way is. It may not be baking, it may be drawing, it may be doing math problems, it may be Sudoku, I don't know, but whatever it is,
Wait,
this
what's
idea,
Sudoku?
what
Wait,
was
you mean Sudoku?
Sud-
Wait.
Sudoku, isn't it called
Oh,
Sudoku?
yes.
The
Okay,
the
I didn't understand. Now I know.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't do those, but that uh because there's so much, and frankly, one of the things that I'm doing right now is I'm in development of an out your window earth science video module
Oh,
learning thing.
nice. I
Yeah,
could use
so
that.
oh,
We could really
cool.
use that, Isolde. Keep
So
going.
yes, that's one of the things that I'm doing, and I'm developing. It's a cloud ID, cloud identification, just out your
Oh,
window, and
yes.
so yeah, that's part of that pivoting thing that I was talking about. And so, I'm going to have that up so that if you want to come and you want to look out your window and see the kinds of clouds there are, because that'll tell you what the weather's going to be like tomorrow, whether or not you're going to need to water the plants on your balcony or not, whether, all of that you can learn just by looking outside your window and knowing what the clouds are and
Love
what they
it.
mean.
I
So
love it.
that's so important, these little things that can really help us, not just survive, because I think obviously survival is important, but also maintain a sense of self and a sense of equilibrium during what is arguably a really, really rocky time for us all.
Mhm.
So I'm so grateful that you brought that up. I think it's wonderful. And I am coming to your house as soon as the quarantine is lifted. I'm just
Come
saying,
on.
um, bring on the oatmeal chocolate chip cookies. Thank you very much. So
Sure.
so yeah, I know I could keep speaking with you over the next 14 hours, but I think probably your family wants to have you for dinner. So maybe we should consider saving the rest of this very amazing conversation for the next time when we get together and talk about Contact and Star Trek and every other thing under the sun. So I
That's
want to thank
perfect.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was such an honor and such a pleasure to get a chance to catch up with you and talk with you again. And I would love, before we go, to ask you to tell people where they can find you. I know bethmund.com/casual space is your podcast, but you have an Instagram account now. So where do people
Gosh.
find you on Instagram? Because let's build up that Instagram presence.
You're so kind. Thank you, Azolda. I love talking to you. And yes, we have to sci-fi chat because I can't process these things with anyone other than a space geek sometimes, and I have to really go down that rabbit hole, and I have to say, like, to the detail. And I'm such an observer in the movies that I'm like, did you see that? Did you see that it was foreshadowing? And sometimes my husband's like, it's just a movie. And I'm like, it's never just a movie. There's everything purposeful in the shot. And he's like,
Exactly.
okay, Instagram, good question. I think I'm Casual Space Podcast on
Okay.
Instagram. The Facebook page is where I really live all the time, and that's Casual Space Podcast on Facebook. We have a page. The podcast lives on my website at bethmund.com. Yes, thank you. And now more than ever, let's see, am I anywhere else? I'm on LinkedIn. And now more than ever, I'm inviting people to groups to be part of the community in what I'm calling a mission patch challenge. So my show needs a mission patch. And I am looking for all of the illustrators and artists and people who are creative like you, Isolde, to take Casual Space Podcast and make it into a patch. So if you're bored and you want to, take on that challenge, who knows? It might be selected and become the logo for the show, because it's something we've thought about for quite some time. And I'm like, wait, why am I struggling with this? There's way more creative people who can come up with a fun, mission patch that showcases all the things we do on the show. So that's an activity we're doing right now. And thank you. I can't wait to hear from everyone on the podcast who comes. I love your comments. I have, one more address.
Mhm.
If you ever have a question that can go directly to me, right to me for the podcast, it's askbeth@casualspacepodcast.com. Goes right to my inbox, and that's anything from like can I have more information on this guest? Can you put some more, topics like this on the show? Can we talk, more about this or that? Everything. Or if you have a third grader that wants more science, and I'll connect you to people like Isolda who can show you the clouds outside your window. So ask Beth at casualspacepodcast.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then if I could ask one last thing, if you had the ability to skywrite anything for the world to see, what would you say?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. How much fuel do I have in the airplane? How much smoke do I have? Oh my.
See, there you are, always the science person. Imagine science fiction, infinite fuel, infinite smoke.
Oh,
You
I
could
love
write
it. Okay.
anything.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. You really stumped me on this. Came out of digging deep here. Maybe just love. That's so simple, but really, maybe that would be such a wonderful thing to see in the sky right now. Or I would take a quote from Contact or Carl Sagan and just remind everyone that we are infinite and so precious and tiny and so significant. I don't know. Depends on how. I've got a big sky.
I know.
What would you write?
It's actually kind of in this moment, the thing that comes to me is really simple. Love yourself, love each other, for we are all stardust.
Oh, Salta, that's the mic drop.
It's funny that you asked me, because that's exactly what was going through my mind. I thought to myself, what would I write? And that's it. It's an honoring of Carl Sagan, who is one of my personal heroes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, it's so very true, because it speaks to kindness and compassion for everyone and everything. And the more we do that, the more we enrich everyone and everything. So that to me is it. So I, again, thank you so much, Beth. I really, really appreciate you being on the show. I'm so grateful. I will have all of your contact details for all of you who are listening. I'm going to have all of Beth's contact details in the show notes, as well as some of the links I promised for places like the Centers for Disease Control and other places where you can get information on some of the topics we talked about. And of course, I'm going to have at least one or two of my favorite NASA sites, nasa.gov and images.nasa.gov and data.nasa.gov, all of those really cool places where if you want to get more information about space, you can have that in the show notes. And I want to thank you for listening. This has been such a wonderful conversation. I am sure that you are going to go straight out and subscribe to Beth's podcast, remember, Casual Space, because it's so much fun to listen to it. I listen to it every week. It's a lot of fun. You will love it. You will learn so much. Your curiosity will be piqued, and you're going to want to know more. So if you like what you are hearing here, please consider listening, subscribing, and also it would mean the world to me. It would mean the solar system to me, nay, the galaxy, if you would leave a review on iTunes or Google Podcasts or wherever it is you listen to the show. Until next time, this is Isolda Trachtenberg for the Creative Mindset Podcast, sending you all of my love. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the podcast if you're new, and please tell your friends about the community we're building here. Today's episode was produced by Isolda Trachtenberg and is copyright Isolda Trachtenberg 2019. Today's music was from Kevin MacLeod, Laser Groove, and Ave Marimba, brought to you by Creative Commons License 3.0. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope. Until next time, I send you all of my love.